Hey everybody, and welcome back to another max velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be breaking down a massive storm that'll bring a big threat for severe weather tomorrow, along with the threat for a massive winter storm as we head into this week. I'll give you the latest breakdown on both of these situations and more in this forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today, beginning with the western tier of the United States, which is where that low pressure system is going to originate. That'll eventually bring the threat for some showers and storms in the southern and central plains. This will lead to the threat for severe weather tomorrow, bringing all modes of severe weather, including damaging winds, large hail, and even some tornadoes. And then this low pressure system will eventually go through the Midwest and the Northeast, bringing the threat for ice accumulation and snow once again. So let me put that into motion for you so you can actually see what's going to be happening over the next several days. Beginning with tomorrow, that is when that low pressure system will cross over the Rocky Mountains and eventually explode over the central plains. That'll bring that threat for severe weather anywhere from Nebraska all the way back through Texas. Once we go into the overnight hours Sunday into Monday, that is when we'll be watching for ice and snow to begin to develop back up in the Midwest, and this will be a big threat that'll break more down in depth for you in just a moment. This will eventually go through the Midwest and into the Northeast, where additional snowfall accumulation and ice accumulation is going to be likely, and I'll show you more specific details on that here in just a moment. But let's first talk about that severe weather threat. And you might notice this is a massive area. This is just for tomorrow. We have a marginal threat from Texas all the way back through western Illinois. It is a large area that we'll be watching. In addition to that, there is a moderate threat of severe weather. Fairly rare occurrence of us seeing a moderate threat. That is going to include areas just west of the Oklahoma City metro area and just west of Interstate 35, primarily for western Oklahoma. We also have an enhanced risk of severe weather all the way back through southwestern Missouri. The main concerns will be damaging winds out of these storms. That is why there's a moderate threat, but there might be a couple of tornadoes along with maybe some large hail out of the initial cells. I'll show you the future radar in just a moment, but I want to show you something that's absolutely insane. So tonight, the wind gusts across the southern plains are between basically 10 to 20 miles per hour. Once we go into tomorrow afternoon and evening, once that cold front passes, look back over in the Texas Panhandle. Wind gusts as high as 70 miles per hour behind the severe weather. Something that I've really never seen before is these extreme values behind a low pressure system like this. It'll be absolutely wild. And once that line of storms moves through Oklahoma, wind gusts upwards of 60 to 70 miles per hour will exist. Absolutely mind-boggling what we'll be seeing tomorrow behind, again, the storms. There will not be many clouds out there tomorrow when those wind gusts are as high as 70 miles per hour. So very impressive to say the least. Now, in terms of the instability with this event, there is some good news. The instability values are not going to be as high as what they could be due to the amount of cloud cover that is ongoing in the southern plains. So you can thank the clouds for that, because we will not be seeing high instability values, which basically means the severe weather will be slightly more limited than what it could be. It could be a much worse outbreak than what we're already going to see, but eventually the instability values by the overnight hours drop to almost nothing. So the storm should weaken after about midnight or so across the southern plains. In terms of the tornado threat, where it'll be greatest is likely going to be in western Oklahoma. Basically where the moderate threat of severe weather is will be our highest threat, and eventually going closer to around midnight, that threat is very low in northeastern Oklahoma and southeastern Kansas. So if you have any storm chasing plans, best area would probably be in western Oklahoma tomorrow. In terms of the timing, once we begin around 4 to 5 o'clock, that is when storms will begin to fire up north of Amarillo, and eventually by about 5 to 6 o'clock, we'll have a cluster of storms that'll develop, most likely organizing into a line of storms around 6 to 7 o'clock. And once 7 o'clock hits, look at this. Very potent storms over in western sections of Oklahoma, and these are going to be the storms that are capable of wind gusts as high as 80 miles per hour and maybe even a little bit higher than that. Along with that, these storms will be capable of hail upwards of maybe hen egg sized, and even the threat for maybe a couple of tornadoes. So our hotspot for severe weather will be closer to areas near Elk City. By 8 to 9 o'clock, that line of storms will approach Interstate 35. So if you are traveling along Interstate 35 tomorrow evening, be very mindful of this and pull over if you're able to, if you're a truck driver, because wind gusts could be as high as 80 miles per hour, even through areas in central Oklahoma. By 9 to 10 o'clock, that line will still be very severe. Again, wind gusts could still be upwards of 80 miles per hour, even as far east as areas back near Tulsa and just off to the northeast of there. And eventually by midnight, that line of storms should be, for the most part, out of the state of Oklahoma. Back through Missouri, a little spotlight here. There will be some storm activity tomorrow after midnight or so near Joplin, as well as near Springfield. This will produce mainly just a damaging wind threat. Can't rule out a brief tornado, but that would primarily be at or west of Joplin if there were to be anything like that. And eventually by Monday morning, those storms will be moving through areas like St. Louis, still providing that threat for maybe some damaging winds upwards of 60 to 65 miles per hour. Now, I did mention there will be a massive winter storm over the Midwest and as well as in the Northeast, and it really will begin with this system Monday morning. There will be a threat for some pretty significant freezing rain, anywhere from Minnesota all the way back through Wisconsin, and then it will even develop in areas like Michigan, who already saw a ton of ice from the previous ice storm. Some of those areas saw upwards of over a half an inch of ice, which led to over 500,000 people without power at one point. So this will not be nearly as significant as that event, but there may be some at least isolated power outages out of it. By around lunchtime on Monday, the freezing rain will primarily be in eastern Wisconsin and back through areas in Michigan. And once we go into Monday afternoon and evening, really a bigger transition to just snow and maybe a rain, snow, sleet mix will be mainly what we'll be watching for closer to the evening hours just after sunset, and eventually going closer to around midnight or so going into Tuesday, there will be a little bit of snow remaining back over in Michigan. In terms of snowfall accumulation, for right now, this is a general estimate, but most of areas in northern Wisconsin will be looking somewhere between 1 to 3 inches. Some areas may get closer to half a foot, and even maybe an isolated spot near the upper Michigan Peninsula could get upwards of 10 inches. Back over in northern Michigan, it will not be the biggest snow event that you've ever seen, but there may again be a few inches of snow out of this. Along with the threat for freezing rain, though, this is a general estimate. Again, things may change as we get closer, but there will be a chance for a bit more of significant ice accumulation in a few isolated areas in central Michigan, and then also back in areas in eastern Minnesota and northwestern Wisconsin. That is where we could see some areas getting upwards of a quarter of an inch of ice. So travel impacts are definitely going to be possible in this sort of scenario, along with maybe some isolated power outages. If there are any areas that get really heavy freezing rain, we could be talking about some more scattered to numerous power outages, but that's a pretty unlikely scenario for right now. In terms of the winter storm back over in the Northeast, we'll be watching for even a little bit of snow going into tomorrow, but it should be pretty minimal with a little offshore low. Once we go into Monday afternoon and evening, that is when some heavier snow will start to arrive, and maybe a little bit of freezing rain as well in Pennsylvania. I'll have more details on that here in the next forecast, but some more heavy snow could even fall. Areas near New York City could even get a little bit of snowfall as we go into early Tuesday morning. And one thing that's pretty interesting about this event is that we'll actually be watching an offshore low develop, which will bring a little bit more moisture along with some snowfall, while the other low pressure system is way back out here to the west. So a pretty interesting setup for this winter storm. Once we go through Tuesday morning, some light to moderate snow will remain, and eventually going into Wednesday morning, there might be still a little bit of light snow in Maine, but for the most part, this will begin to wind down. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already. This forecast is brought to you by Platinum Contracting.